I'm curious what your thoughts are on on item 19 and being able to navigate that, right? And for anyone listening who doesn't know item 19, it's where franchisors can make financial performance representations and like show how much money they can make. Man, there's a huge variance. I mean, you have some that are just showing average numbers of the quartiles. You have some that list all of every single unit, what the actual sales are. You have some that list the kind of a simplified profit and loss statement for each location. But then there's things like less disclosed expenses. Like, how can someone understand item 19?
Yeah, item 19 is tricky because there's one, it's not even a required disclosure. So it's only probably about two-thirds of franchisors, somewhere around there, that actually include an item 19. And to me, it's a bit of a red flag if they don't, right? If they don't have an item 19 and they're not, telling you at least what the revenue of the franchise, Z's are or what they've done themselves, to me, that's a little bit concerning. It's not necessarily like don't buy it because there might be a reason for that. One of the things we see oftentimes is someone selling a franchise system where they have like one or two company owned locations. They put those numbers in item 19, and those numbers are not necessarily good indicators of what a franchisee can expect to earn because those units might be, like that window company in a hurricane market, right? Or it could have been, hey, they've established this unit for 15 years, and so it's got all this goodwill in the area, and everybody knows them. Or maybe they opened, a fitness boutique, and they're the only, fitness boutique in town, and so they were doing great. So, when you've got one or two units as your barometer in item 19, to me, I look at that with a high degree of skepticism of whether those numbers are going to pan out the same for the franchisees. Now, when you have a lot of units that are accounted for in item 19, then to me, that's a better indicator of what you can expect to earn because, now that system in year 3, 4, and 5 is incorporating franchisee data into its item 19. So those numbers are likely to be more accurate. But like big picture, I think, for me, if I'm buying a franchise, I think item 19, if they have profits or expenses, that's a real benefit. Obviously, because a franchisee at the end of the day wants to know how much can I make. And so, if those numbers are in the item 19, to me, that's fantastic. That's a really good thing that makes me more likely to want to buy that franchise. If there's just revenue, that's okay. I think then you need to go to franchisees in the system and try to find out, okay, what are the expenses? What does the profit margin look like? And kind of fill in the gaps. And if there's nothing in item 19, to me, that's a bit of a red flag. And unless you can find information from franchisees that suggest that the numbers are very good, I would caution going forward with that brand.
Yeah, so sounds like really great insights. Is there ever what would you consider a good reason why a franchisor would not have an item 19?
So like pizza locations during COVID, did fantastic, right? A lot of like delivery, pizza places did really well during the pandemic, and so they were faced with a dilemma when they came out of the pandemic of how do you disclose your numbers because the numbers that you had for those pandemic years are arguably inflated compared to what you would expect going forward. So franchisors looked at that in two different ways. One is you include the pandemic data plus the data prior to, so you can kind of show the full picture, or you pull that data. Either of those is like a good legal way to kind of involve the situation, but it might be a reason why you don't see it. The other reason is you might not have the data yet. We talked about that startup franchise system that only has one or two units, and those one or two units might not be indicative of what your franchisee can expect to obtain. So, they might say, well, we've done so well that these numbers aren't going to be really good, you know, reasonable indicators of what a franchisee can expect to make. So we should pull these to be more legally safe. That I think franchisors will tend to include those numbers almost in every circumstance because they want to sell franchises. But that would be a good reason to pull it out. And then if you talk to the first couple franchisees in the system and they're doing really well, then that might be a reason to go forward with that brand. But it definitely would merit a lot of more due diligence on the numbers.
That's interesting. I never thought about that perspective that they did so well that it wasn't truly representative and you wouldn't want to put it in there. Um yeah, I always think it's interesting when and some big franchisors, some big ones don't have item 19s. what is there is there a competitive reason why some of them won't? Like they don't want their competition to know what they're doing. But I've seen brands that have hundreds, multiple hundreds of franchisees that don't list anything in item 19.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think a lot of the bigger brands, especially on the restaurant side, can be public companies, and oftentimes they have to disclose that information anyway. So probably for them, it's not a competitive benefit. For the private companies, I think generally either they think the data is not very good that they have, or the numbers aren't that great, or they just think, hey, if we've got a good enough concept, we don't need to sell them with item 19. That we've already proven our concept. That might be the thought process, but generally, I think franchisors want to include an item 19 if they can.
If you enjoyed this short clip from the podcast, you can check out another short clip right here. Or if you want to watch the full episode of this podcast, you can watch that here. And remember, knowledge is not power. It's applied knowledge that's power. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.